considers it going to church. But to me, until you go to Sunday school, then you go to church. But people wait until church, and you're missing, I would say, the best part, because you don't know what they're talking about until you learn of it. Okay, we had the prayer. As I said, I'm digging this gene, and I'm going to bring this lesson to you, and I thank God to be able to do it. Our subject today is trials and denial. Before we go into the lesson, I want everybody to just say this. As many times I ask you, I want you to say this. I am not. Okay. Okay, now I'll probably ask you again. I want you to just remember that. I am not. Trials and denial. February 6, 2022. Our lesson text, John 18, chapter 15 through the 27. Related scriptures, Matthew, the 26th chapter, 59 through the 75th. Mark, the 14th chapter, 55 through the 72nd. Luke's, the 22nd chapter, 55 through 71. The time is AD 30. Place, Jerusalem. Jesus said, I am, and ye shall see me, see the Son of Man sitting on the right hand of power and coming in the clouds of heaven. Mark the 14th chapter and the 62nd verse. Okay. As we were saying, trials and denials. We know what we're going into. And from the subject, it's going to be a trial. And as you can see, it's not going to be straight because there's a denial. Somewhere everybody's not going to do what they're supposed to do, what they're asked to do, in other words. So our lesson let us know where we're going into, what we're going into. Okay, we'll do the scripture. Now, all this lesson is coming from Matthew, Mark, and Luke. These are the gospel writers. Now, I'm going to tell you a little bit about this before I go into the lesson scripture. Now, Matthew, the chief priest and the whole council, tried to find some false evidence against Jesus. This is what the whole lesson is about. You know, like you're going to a movie, you're getting ready. This is the preview, what I'm going to give you before I go into it. The whole council tried to find some false evidence against Jesus to put him to death. But they could not find anything, even though people came forward and told lies on him. The high priest stood up and said to Jesus, have you any answer to give to this accusation against you? But Jesus kept quiet. Mark was saying, said, the chief priests and the whole council tried to find some evidence, same thing, against Jesus in order to put him to death, just like the other one, but they couldn't find any. These writers was giving their story of what they saw and heard. Many witnesses told lies against Jesus, but their stories did not agree. Then some men stood up and told this lie against Jesus, said, we heard him. I will tear down the temple which men have made, and after 3 days I will build one back. That is not made by man. Not even they, however, could make their story agree. The high priest tore his robes and said, we don't need any more witnesses. They just got so upset. Now, I'm not telling you all because, see, they're talking to Jesus at this time. They'd arrested him. They're asking him all these questions. And they was getting upset because he didn't say what they wanted them to say. And it said he tore his robe. The high priest tore his robe and said, "We don't need any more witnesses. You heard this blasphemy. What is your decision?" See, they had it made up in their mind already what they wanted to do, and that was to kill Jesus, to put him to death. Now, Luke tells mostly about the denial. And as I said it before, I want you to say it again. I am not. Okay. And Simon Peter followed Jesus, and so did another disciple. That disciple was known unto the high priest. It's good to know people, isn't it? And went in with Jesus into the palace of the high priest. He didn't give his name of this other disciple. But Peter stood at the door without. And it was cold. Listen in the story. Then went out another disciple, which was known unto the high priest. The high priest knew him, and spoke unto her. They kept the door and brought in Peter. That disciple brought his friend in. He knew the high priest, and so he could get in who he wanted to. And our books tell us that it might have been this John, because he didn't just had to have his name just be said out in everything and what he was writing. But we got to have our name put in everything, So that was for me. That was for me. But he wasn't doing this. Then said the damsel that kept the door unto Peter, "Art not thou also one of the man's disciples?" He said, "I am not. I am not." He was there. And see, she asked him this question. She was a keeper. He was in the courtyard. He wasn't in the house yet, in the palace. And the servants and the officers stood there, who had made a fire of coals, for it was cold. And they warmed themselves. And Peter stood with them and warmed himself. And so now he was thinking, too, by getting close to these, ain't nobody going to notice me. He wanted to get warm, but he wanted to get close in with the other ones so nobody be looking at him. They wouldn't see him. This is Peter, y'all. The high priest then asked Jesus of his disciples and of his doctrine. Okay, now, we know that the other disciples, they had run away. And Peter, he came with them, but he was afar off. He didn't really want them to see him. He was afar off. And so the high priest asked, where's his disciple, and then the doctrine of what they're about. Jesus answered him, "I speak openly to the world. I ever taught in the synagogue and in the temple, where the Jews always resort, and in secret have I said nothing." He was saying, I've been everywhere speaking. I wasn't hiding anywhere, trying to close in everything. I didn't do that. I spoke in all these places. Everybody's seen me. So ask them. Let them tell you what I said. They know what I said. Why asking me? It said, ask them which heard me, what I have said unto them. Behold, they know what I said. And when he had thus spoken, one of the officers which stood by struck Jesus with the palm of his hand, saying, "Answer thou the high priest so." He was saying, you don't talk to him like that. Jesus was just speaking the truth. I've been speaking all over. I wasn't trying to hide anything. And so Jesus answered, "If I have spoken evil, bear witness of the evil." In other words, bring it up. Tell me. Tell me what I said that was evil. But if well, then why smite me? Why you want to hit me? And I did well. If I did well, then why you want to hit me? But if I did wrong, tell me, what did I say? Tell me. Let me know. This is Jesus speaking, y'all. I mean, this is a good lesson. Now Annas had sent his bond unto Caiaphas, the high priest. And Simon Peter stood and warmed himself, still warming himself. They said therefore unto him, Art not thou also one of his disciples? They were looking at him. He denied it and said, what? I am not. That's what I wanted you to get. I am not. I want you to take that home with you. I am not. I don't care how you're looking at me. I'm not. I don't care what you say. I'm not. I'm not what you say. One of the servants of the high priest, being his kinsman, whose ear Peter cut off. Remember that in the garden of Gethsemane? He said, didn't I see you in the garden with them? That was his cousin. Then Peter then denied again, and immediately the cock crew. He already told him what's what was going to happen, right? When Jesus says something that it's going to be, it's going to be. And it come out just like that. So now many people have had the experience of being in court. They've been there as defendants, plaintiffs, jurors, witnesses, or just as observers. Few of us qualify to be in court as attorneys or judges. Unlike television courtroom dramas, the wheels of justice grind slowly in a real courtroom. Anybody ever been in the courtroom? Yeah. I had to go finally. I was so glad that they didn't put me on. I just didn't like him for the case. But you know how it goes. And sometimes it's drawn out for several months, or even years. That's how they do the trial. But Jesus was tried and convicted within a matter of hours. That's because they already had in their mind what they wanted to do. They were going to find him guilty and they wanted to put him to death. So it didn't take them no long time to do it. He had no right of appeal or any legal representation. They was ready for him to go. Now we got these outlines. Peter's first denial, Jesus' first trial, and Peter's further denial. Now the first trial, Peter followed Jesus. As I was saying, he was getting real close to him. And did another disciple that was with him, was known to the high priest, went in with Jesus into the palace of the high priest. But Peter just stood out there. Then went out the other disciple. He came back out, which was known unto the high priest. He knew him and spoken to her that kept the door and brought Peter in. That was his fellow disciple and friend. Then said the damsel that kept the door unto Peter, Art thou not one of this man's disciples? He said, I am not. And the servants and officers stood there who had made a fire of coal and said, for it was cold. Now, it wasn't a flaming fire. And so if it was a flaming fire, you know, they had to move back further. But with it just cold, you got to get closer in order to get warm. And he thought he was hid. And Peter stood with them and warmed himself. When Jesus was sieged in the garden, the disciples fled into the night. They got away. But true to his bold nature, though cautiously, Peter followed afar off so he can kind of see what was going on. That is, at a distance, to see what was going to happen. While we cannot be certain, most think that the reference to another disciple was to none other than the author of this gospel. That's John. It was an author, unnamed disciple. It was an unknown Jerusalem disciple who had access to high society. He was used to that and going to the high society stuff. It could have been, some say it could have been him. whether it was an unnamed disciple or John. It really didn't matter. He was known to the high priest, that was the thing, and he let him come in. He got to be a part of it and see what was going on. It depends on who you know. We do not know what the connection was, but it did make it possible for Peter to be granted access to the courtyard of his residence. It is likely that the high priest and possibly other members of his family resided or near the temple courts. In the time of Christ, the entire temple complex covered about 36 acres. When they was talking about that, I never thought about how big it was. It was only after the other disciples spoke to the woman who watched the gate to the courtyard that Peter was able to gain admission to the courtyard. As is still true, access to both people and places is often contingent on who we know. That's how I got in. This even referred to these people as gatekeepers, depending on who you know. Standing in denial. As the woman let Peter into the courtyard, she asked him if he too was not one of Jesus' disciples. Exactly why she suspected this about Peter is unclear. Perhaps she thought she recognized him from a previous encounter, or she may have detected his Galilean accent. She made it easy for Peter to say no. In that her question, Peter is cast in the form expecting the answer no. Worth nodding to is the fact that her question is formulated to cast disarrangement upon Jesus. They got all they can upon him. You're not one, are you? At this point, Peter swiftly denied that he was one of Jesus' disciples. Before going any further, stopping there and saying, where are you in this story? Where are you? Peter denied him. He had a chance. And he had said before he would not leave him. Peter had told Jesus this, up to his death. He said he would not leave him. Well, here he is. So I want to know that do you find yourself in this anywhere? He would eventually deny the Lord 3 times, as foretold by Jesus in all 4 Gospels. Those gospel writers that I was reading to you before, all of this is this story. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. The night was cool, so those gathered had built a fire to keep warm, being a fire cold. It was not a blazing fire that people could easily be warmed by at a distance. Such a fire would require those present to gather closely together at the edge to keep themselves warm. Peter was likely trying to blend in with those present. See, he thought if he blend in, nobody would notice him. He was just in there. And he therefore stood close to them. The decision would eventually set him up, again, be challenged about knowing Jesus, leading to his further denials of him. Now, he was trying to hide, get close up in there, but then they were still seeing him, still noticing, even the way he talked. Something going to give you away. Then it said the first trial. The high priest then asked Jesus of his disciples and of his doctrine. Jesus answered him, and that's when he told him, I spoke openly to the world. I even taught in the synagogue and in the temple, where the Jews always resort, where they always be. And in secret, I haven't said anything. Said nothing, in other words. All of these places, I have nothing to hide. Why ask thou me? Ask them that was with me what I said unto them. Behold, they know what I said. And when he had thus spoken, one of the officers that was standing by struck Jesus with the palm of his hand, saying, Answer thou the high priest. He was saying you talk to him a certain way. See, Jesus wasn't saying what they wanted to hear. They were making up what they wanted to hear, and they want him to say it. Because they had the plan to kill him already. But they just want him to say something so they could go on with what they had to do. Jesus answered him and said, If I have spoken evil, in other words, tell me. Tell me what I said. Tell me the wrong that I've done. Isn't that what you want? If you say I've done you wrong, tell me what I did. And if not, then why are you going to go against me for something? You're wrong. That's what the lesson was saying. Let me know. Now Ananias had sent him bound unto Caiaphas, the high priest. It's so hard to say that. Caiaphas, the high priest. Sent him on to him. He was tired of him. Bound him and sent him on to him. Interrogation and reply. Jesus' first hearing was before Annas, the former high priest and father-in-law to Caiaphas, the current high priest. See, he was through with him. But the office of high priest was a lifetime position, and the Jews still considered it so, despite the fact that its term was now set by the Roman authorities. Ananias was still considered by many Jews as the lawful high priest. So it is undoubtedly why Jesus was brought to him first. Before things could move ahead, Ananias would have to give his stamp of approval on the proceedings. See, they was trying to go in the order that it's supposed to have been. He was the first, and he was in high. And so they had to have his stamp of approval to move on. See, they were moving this thing on. They had in mind what they were going to do. Ananias questioned Jesus about his disciples and his doctrine. He wanted to know just really what they were doing, who he was, and wanted him to say it. Since all rabbis had disciples, the high priest likely wanted to know where Jesus' followers were from and possibly why they had decided to follow him. They were getting all the information that they could get. He may also wanted to know how many disciples Jesus had and what revolutionary threat, if any, they might possess. They were trying to see who all was with Jesus. How many is it? Because then you see how many is and what they plan on doing so they can be ready. Since the high priest had connection with the Roman authorities, it is likely that he wanted to ascertain whether Jesus and his disciples was a political threat to the Jewish religious hierarchy and their always tense relationship with Rome. This was Ananias making a preliminary examination of Jesus, probably to see on what terms Jesus had made them disciples. They're getting all the information that they could. The high priest also questioned Jesus concerning his teaching. He wanted to know just what are you teaching them? And that's when Jesus had replied, to them. Ask them. They all know. Ananias was probably trying to decide whether his teaching were any threat to the Sadducees, the party to which he and many other priests belonged. You see, he was trying to see if he had something against them. What was he going to do about that? Because now that was the party that he was with. And so he wanted to know what they planned on doing. Whatever party they were associated with were bent on ridding themselves of Jesus. This was got to get rid of him. While the Pharisees and Sadducees could agree on little, they didn't agree on much. But right here, they did agree that Jesus should be done away with. That's the plan. In response to the high priest's inquiry about his teaching, Jesus boldly referred to what he had taught openly in public places of worship, both in synagogues as well as in the Jerusalem temple. It was not as though Jesus had been running a covert operation. He wasn't hiding anything. All he had taught and done had been in public, in open, in public forums. Everybody saw him and heard him, and it was up to them what they should say. Then there was an abusive treatment. Early in his ministry, Christ had said, "If I bear witness of myself, my witness is not true." By this he meant that from an Old Testament legal standpoint, a person's testimony about himself does not verify any fact as true. Some objective corroborating testimony is required to establish a fact as true. For example, if one person accuses another of a crime, but the accused person denies the charge, it is merely one person's word against another. Nothing has been legally proved. Additional corroborating testimony must be presented to establish what the accused is in fact guilty of that crime. The above being true, it was not irregular that Jesus would answer the high priest by referring him to those who had actually heard him teach. They didn't ask them. A considerable amount of disinformation about Jesus and his teaching was circulated in Jerusalem at this time. He therefore told the high priest that he should consult those who had actually heard him on various occasions. At this, one of the officers of the high priest, that's when he slapped Jesus across the face with the palm of his hand. The Lord's indirect answer to the high priest was seen as insubordination and disrespect. So he tried to pretend he didn't like the way he spoke to to the high priest, was saying that he was disrespecting him. But he had in mind anything. This was not the beginning of the abuse Jesus would endure at the hands of both the Jewish and the Roman authorities throughout his trial and execution. As I said, they had it planned. Everything was planned and what they were going to do. Then there's an honest challenge. In response to this abuse, Jesus challenged his attackers to give a valid reason for the attack. Since Jesus had said nothing evil and had meant so much disrespect to the office of the high priest, why had the officer struck him? In a prior confrontation with the Pharisees, Jesus had challenged them by saying, "Which of you accuses me of sin? And if I say the truth, why do you not believe me?" Christ was innocent of all wrongdoing. Christ was innocent of all wrongdoing. Just think about this trial. The whole trial, Christ was innocent. And the officer's reaction was unwarranted. They just did what they wanted to do. This was just one of many violations of the law that occurred during the trials of Jesus. According to the attorney, Earl Wingo, there was 15 obvious violations of Jewish and Roman law in the proceeding against Jesus. 15 of them, y'all, that was wrong that they were doing. So it let us know they just wanted to kill him and get rid of him. They broke the law. Even though they couldn't get together, the Sadducees and Pharisees, they didn't agree on nothing. But right here, they agreed. They agreed. They just had in mind they wanted to get rid of him. And that's what was happening. Okay. Abrupt dismissal. At this point, Annas had apparently heard enough. He sent Jesus to the current high priest, and that was Caiaphas, his son-in-law. Caiaphas, high priest. As a final note concerning the term high priest, it is used not only of the presiding high priest, but of others who were leaders in the Jewish religious hierarchy. Hence, when it is used of one person, it is rendered high priest. But when more than one priest is indicated, it is translated chief priest. This is true in all four Gospels. Concerning Jesus' trial before Caiaphas, the other Gospels give considerable detail. Mark, Luke, Matthew, and John. Now that's what I was reading to you at first. The first thing I was telling you, all of these Gospel writers, they were given considerable details, and I talked just a few of the things that each one of them had to say. These other accounts also include the fact that the Jewish Supreme Court, the Sanhedrin, condemned Jesus. Since not all members of the Sanhedrin had to be present to conduct business, it may have been a hand-picked group, just a hand-picked group that was simply rubber stamp the wishes of Annas and Caiaphas. See, it was already set up. Didn't need all of them, just a few, just a hand-pick. Pick certain ones. I heard that before somewhere. Just get the one that you think is going to do what you want to do. And what you want to do was kill Jesus, put him to death. That's what you want to do. So you don't have everybody to come. You just get a few, hand-picked ones. The one that you knew was going to do what you wanted them to do. That's what that was about. That's right. Have mercy, Lord. There were, however, a few dissenters to their action. Now, Peter's further denials. And Simon Peter stood and warmed himself, still standing by the fire, trying to get himself warm. And can you imagine him looking too? And see, because they know they're going to be after him. They said, therefore, unto him, art thou also one of his disciples? He denied it and said, I am not. No, I told y'all once, I am not. And he already told Jesus before he would give up his life, he wouldn't leave him. But then when this came up to him, you see the difference that it makes. It tells us on down here that we should be careful of what we say. Denial too. Meanwhile, Simon Peter was still warming himself at the fire, along with some servants and soldiers. Someone asked him, are not thou also one of the disciples? They keep asking him, y'all. And he had done previously. Peter denied Jesus by saying, I am not. This was the second time since Jesus' arrest that Peter had denied him publicly. Peter had pledged his loyalty to Jesus, even if it meant his own death. But when he was actually faced with owning his loyalty to Christ before those who could have him arrested and punished along with his master, his courage failed. When push came to shove, he lied to save his own skin. This is a humbling lesson for anyone who relies on his own self-confidence. It isn't good, is it? In the Christian life. Paul warns us, let him that thinketh he standeth take heed, lest he fall. Don't think you got it so great until you come in the position. What they say till you walk in the shoe. Whole different story when you walk in the shoe. As I said, find yourself. Could you have stood there? Even though he went with him, but he was looking and watching. He just wanted to see what was going on. And that way he had more to tell. But he didn't want to do what he said he was doing. He didn't want to do that. It is only through the grace and power of the Holy Spirit that we can persevere in our faithfulness to Christ. You know, we'll say, I love the Lord. I love him. I love serving the Lord. I'll serve him anytime, It doesn't matter. I'll serve the Lord. But this Sunday, the sun didn't shine, and we got a little rain. You know what? I just can't make it today. I just can't make it. But you love the Lord so that the rain won't let you come. That's when you're talking at yourself. But when you get in the shoe, it's a whole different story. It's a whole different story. This is what the lesson was telling me. And it's only by the Holy Spirit that we can persevere in our faithfulness to Christ. Now, we can't get that until we come and see what the Holy Spirit has to tell us. And somebody I was talking to, I said, you got to go to church in order to see what God has to tell you. He's got a message for you. All of this that we're going through something. But the only way to find out what God has to say is to come and hear what he got to say. Put on the mask and see what God has to say. Our pastor's doing everything that he can. He sprays, makes sure the church is sprayed, it's clean. He's doing everything, like the water fountain is cut off, just everything that he can find to do, so that God's people will have a place that they can come and see what God has to say. And I was telling my daughter, I said, God got a message. We're in a bad situation. And it's good to know that you got a God on your side. You know that. But you can't just sit at home and waiting for it to pass by. You got to come out and see. Come out and see what he got to say. Now, it's not through you. He gave us a leader. And the leader tells us just what to do. We got to lean and depend on Jesus. We can't just run and hide. Listen what Sally Sue got to say. What that says, Sally Sue, don't take that shot, because it's going to run you crazy. Don't do that, because you won't be the same person. Don't do that because they're doing that so they can watch you. They're watching you anyway. Watching you anyhow. What are you doing that you don't want it seen? That's not the way the Christian is supposed to live. Like Jesus was saying, I've been everywhere teaching. The temple, the synagogues, everywhere I was teaching. I don't have nothing to hide. And as a Christian, we got to know that we got a God. We got a God on our side. I was telling my grandson, he was on against it too because of what his friends was telling him. Not doctors, some friends. Don't take that. You won't be able to live right. You won't be able to talk right. If you're doing something wrong, you ought to be glad that they clean you up. And that's what you need, to be cleaned up, because time is coming real short. And if you need to be cleaned up, it's a time to get cleaned up. Are you able to stand in the shoe? God got a message for you. But it's up to us to come and get it. We're in difficult times. But the Bible tells us all the time that these things are going to be. It's going to be. It's going to happen. It's in the Word. It's in the Word. Everything that's happening, it's in the Word. But see, you got to be there to hear the Word. Our pastor delivered the word so deeply and let us know what's going to come up on us. Might not come today, might not come tomorrow, but it's coming. And when it comes, you ought to be ready. I want to be ready. And in the best place that you all want to be, in the house of God. Ain't that something? Nobody is thinking about that. Oh, I'm not going to church. I'm not going because all the people got COVID. Everybody got it. So I'm not going. That's why we're so empty. But we're not trying to find out what can we do. What can we do to protect ourselves? And the best place to be is under his roof. God got an answer for it. My time over. Okay, I better sit down, y'all. I hope, I hope you got something out of the lesson. Depending on the Lord.